Thanks for joining us again here at Illuminated. We're joined by our next candidate, who is also for the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District, Ms. Sharon Waller. So let's go ahead and jump right into this. Thank you so much for joining us, and congratulations on your endorsement from IVI. It's always great to have new candidates here.
Thank you, Jim, and thanks for taking the time to do this interview process, and thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So I want to make sure that folks get to know you a little bit better. So what's your kind of background? You're not on the board right now, or on the district. So what is your current background?
I'm an environmental engineer, licensed in the state of Illinois, 30 years of experience in water and a PhD in water. And this has led me to work internationally and nationally, and kind of highlighted for me that Illinois is in need of some policies to help us adapt to climate change, and also address the Gulf of Mexico dead zone, for which we have been sued, and we have to reduce our phosphorus leaving our state borders. We have a goal 25% by 25.
Okay.
And we need a village and policy in order to make that.
Now, when you say an environmental engineer, what does that mean?
Thank you for asking, because I find that people don't know. So it is actually one of the newer engineerings. It is housed in the School of Civil Engineering in most curriculums, but I explain it as it's threading the needle between pro-business and pro-environment. So if you can work in air, land, and water, so my practice has predominantly been in water. And no matter what area you work in, you're predominantly helping industry comply with environmental regulations so that they can stay in business, be good environmental stewards, as most of them want to be, especially the Fortune 500s.
So it's figuring out how the company can still make money but be more environmentally conscious using different materials, or using
conservation. And it actually has changed a little bit in the last couple, maybe decade, because of sustainability in the face of climate change. So resources, what is the sustainable yield for any resource that you can imagine? And water's in that category. So we are kind of blinded to conservation because of that big blue puddle that we can't see across, called Lake Michigan. But just south of I-80, they're running out of groundwater.
And that's, folks who live near Lake Michigan all get lake water. Folks further out usually are dependent upon well water. How much, since MWRD handles mostly Cook County policy and work, how much of the Cook County work involves places that have well water? There
are some well water facilities. So I believe it's Hazel Crest has experienced contamination of their groundwater. So they were buying some with some from Chicago, and they wanted to save money. So that's kind of one of the more famous lawsuits recently. We could definitely be diversifying the water revenue stream for our industry. So I could tell you a few stories about industry that wanted to reuse, and we've kind of stood in their way for lack of policy.
Now, you say reuse, meaning reuse water, or reuse?
Yes.
Okay. And just they weren't allowed to? Is that?
Yes, because in Illinois, water and wastewater fight for revenue, and basically water always wins. So, and even if you do have an economically viable product, maybe there's a revenue advantage to using drinking water that the city councils or village councils would, or have, and as a matter of fact, voted against reuse. I talked to my colleagues at the Department of Health and Department of Buildings, and they say, Sharon, nobody thinks that reuse is a bad idea. It's just that nobody's shown up for it. So let me be that first person. I'm actually trying to form a reuse chapter of a national organization that would just take 5 municipalities. MWRD's already one, so they're kind of more forward-thinking than a bunch, but I'm working with my professional organizations to find more takers.
Now, I'm curious, you said that water and wastewater always compete. Where's the division? Like where, if it comes out of your tap versus if it goes down the drain that's right below the tap. Is that two different departments?
It is. So MWRD treats all the water that leaves your home by drains, but you ask a fascinating question. If you try to explain water to a kid, they just think it's all one water, and it is indeed all one water, as they teach in the water cycle in elementary school, but somehow we've managed to put it in silos. Drinking water over here and wastewater over here, and that's a problem for our management. We, in Illinois, in Cook County, we take water from Lake Michigan, we use it, we treat it, and we send it away to the Gulf of Mexico dead zone. And if we used it again here, wouldn't we treat it better?
Okay, so, and that's the reuse you're talking about in terms of like keeping the water here.
Right. I mean, I think that the baby steps forward are just allowing industry to have an alternative water source that would be both drought-proof and cost resilient, or drought-resilient and cost-stable.
Now, what kind of, you mentioned policy. You said you want to, that it takes policy to help these move forward with cleaning water. What kind of policies are you hoping to be able to enact through MWRD?
Well, through MWRD, I think that the job of the commissioner would best be served kind of working with the state legislature. You can imagine, especially in our current political climate, that the state reps and senators are not going to get elected on water policy. Maybe downstate, probably not in the Cook County region. So I think it's the job of the MWRD commissioner to draw attention to these issues and to point out that there's only 16 states left without water reuse policy. And these 12 states that have been sued for the Gulf of Mexico dead zone, Illinois is in both groups. And if you look at the 12 states that have been sued and the 16 that don't have water policy, we're majority in the Mississippi River Basin. So the water reuse policy is a tool that should be in our toolbox for both addressing this kind of environmental justice issue of the dead zone, but then also adapting to climate change. There's other policies also that other states have, such as water quality trading credits, that would help us not necessarily just look at MWRD, but broaden the picture to help us meet those 25% reduction by 25 goals.
Now, the 25 by 25 you mentioned, is that specifically for the Gulf of Mexico dead zone?
That's the lawsuit. That's specifically for phosphorus. So there's long-term goals too, but I just mentioned the 25 by 25. So you can search on the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency website, nutrient reduction strategy, and find all the biannual reports back to 2015.
Okay, and so this is one of those cases of we clean the water, we put it back into the waterways, it goes to the Mississippi, down to the Gulf of Mexico, but it hasn't been cleaned enough, and so it's causing... Right,
we have a little bit of an aggravation because we've got warming waters and also the phosphorus, so that's kind of enhancing this harmful algal bloom. So if we could harvest that resource of phosphorus, turn it into a fertilizer, which is already done in some quantities at one of the plants, and it's already planned for a second plant. But they certainly haven't done market saturation. They could do more, and then they can sell that as a revenue stream. Much like this, they could also, once you get it to that level of a quality, you're not that much farther from a reuse quality. So then it's just allowing them to resell it, which would diversify their income. So innovation before taxation, which sounds great to me as a taxpayer, right?
And you keep saying they. Do you mean the county or the state? Who is they in this scenario?
Well, MWRD would be the they being allowed to sell the water. They who would be allowing them to sell the water would be our state legislature. So as a super simple example, Louisiana has a water reuse policy that just says if you have access to gray water, you're obliged to hook up and you may not squander the precious water resources of the state. We do not even have that simple policy. If we did, there are several projects around the state that would be reuse projects right now, but they've been voted down or killed because of economics.
Now, you said gray water. For those who may not be familiar, including myself, what is gray water?
Well, there's a little bit of a spectrum. So gray water could be minimally treated. So anything that comes out of the wastewater treatment plant could be gray water. It also could be anything from, like my shower water could be gray water. But broadly speaking, I think it could be anything that's just not toilet water, ranging all the way to below drinking water standards. So, industry doesn't necessarily need drinking water to use. They could certainly be happy with fit for purpose, which would likely be cheaper than drinking water.
So you would not want to drink gray water, but it could be used at a construction site to keep the dust down, because then no one's drinking it. Doesn't matter if there's a little bit of contamination.
Or industrial washing. Okay. Cooling is a really big issue because a lot of manufacturing processes need cooling water, and that does not need to be drinking water quality. So the drought of 2012 to 2014 hit Minnesota all the way down to Texas. And Archer Daniel Midland and Decatur was particularly hard hit. 4,000 jobs put at risk. So they had the wherewithal to put in a reuse project through a big lagoon so they could keep operating, even though they were under water restrictions. But other businesses in the area had to either choose between furloughing their employees or bringing water in by tanker trucks. So you can imagine that's pretty expensive. So if we had a policy and a program to help support our industry diversify their water resources, that would help us economically, save jobs, and probably draw more economic growth to the region. So that's what I refer to as growing our blue economy.
Okay. If you are elected, what are the top 3 policies you want to look for that you're hoping to enact as a commissioner?
Well, kind of more simplistically, I'd love to make MWRD commissioners elected by districts because I think there's a little bit of a tragedy of commons. That turned out to actually be a little bit of a political question mark, so maybe that conversation will continue, hopefully, if I'm elected. Also, the reuse policy is my number 1. I really feel like that could be the biggest impact, and then right on the heels of that, water quality trading credit programs. Happily, my 3rd issue, which used to be my 1st issue, was lead service lines. As a water engineer, my work has predominantly been in drinking water and then branched over into reuse on a national scale. And there was a trailer to promote automatic exemptions for permitting so that for the old structures, we didn't have to bring them up to modern code. And even though that trailer got voted down in the legislature, the health department has enacted it. So I'm happy to say that that is no longer a statewide issue. That is bounced back to the municipality. So I can't really promote it on the county level. So that's good news. That's good news.
Now, I don't know how much MWRD handles things like lead pipes. I know it's been a huge issue that we've all been discussing. That the pipes are just too old, they have lead in them, we have to get them out. How much of a role does MWRD have in that kind of
MWRD
project?
doesn't, but because I'm a water engineer and I try to work, I feel that the future of water is all water, one water. So that's why I choose to also talk about lead service lines. That's been a social justice issue and just one that I would feel would be tragic if we wound up like Flint, Michigan. So I'm happy to see that we're moving in the right direction on that.
Excellent. Now, you say we're one of 12 states that's been sued for the Gulf of Mexico. What's the status of that right now?
Well, we have interim goals. So IEPA put out a nutrient reduction strategy and with interim goals and long-term goals. So long-term goals of 40%. But the interim goals are 25% phosphorus reduction by 2025. So I don't know what's going to happen if we don't make those goals, but I do feel that it's going to take a village. So that's going to require landowners, even you and I with our residential fertilizers, my kids doing car wash fundraisers, agriculture, and MWRD, and including the small drinking or wastewater treatment facilities. So I'm happy that I'm endorsed by both Sierra Club and the Cook County Farm Bureau. That's kind of an unusual combination of endorsements, but those are 2 definitely that should be at the table along with MWRD in order to form that village of partnerships to address the reduction goals.
I was going to mention, you got to it before I did, Sierra Club, 47th Ward, Northside DFA, Network 49, Girl I Guess, and of course, IVI,
and IVI, right. So that's the perfect mix. I can't imagine anybody else that I would like to be endorsed by. And also Network 49. Did you mention that?
I did, yes.
So, yes. Yeah, so it's a nice progressive group, right?
Yeah, and it sounds like you said the Farm Bureau, so it's people who understand the importance of water in agriculture outside of just the urban area.
Exactly. So who knew that engineers were progressive? But It looks like science is progress.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. We're out of time, but make sure to vote June 28th. What's your punch number?
I am 88, double infinity sideways.
There you go. So make sure to punch 88 and vote for Sharon Waller for Metropolitan Water Reclamation District.
Thank you, Jim.
Sharon, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.